Good evening. This meeting is called to order, Historic Preservation. This meeting has been posted in compliance with the open meeting law. It looks like all members are present, so a quorum is present, so all members are present. All right, now we'll go to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay.
No. Camera doesn't cover.
Okay, public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak on a specific agenda item. To comment during the meeting, members of the public may call 702-589-9629 when the public comment period is open, and it is now open. Okay, we'll move on. The public comment period is now closed. For possible action, approval of the minutes of the September 22nd, 2021 regular meeting.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as printed. Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. For possible action, direction regarding the committee's goals and priorities. And we're opening up to discussion.
Madam Chair, I'll just do a brief overview as to how we've gotten to this point. So with the City Council adoption of the Historic Preservation Plan, which contained several goals to accomplish over the next several years,
Right.
it prompted the committee to reevaluate your goals. This has been an effective tool for the committee for the last several years, something that staff reports out on monthly so that the committee can see progress being made on the committee's goals. At last month's meeting, the direction the committee provided to staff was that you wanted to follow the goals that are contained within the Historic Preservation Plan, and to try to merge that format from the plan into the committee's goals, which then we would continue to bring to the committee monthly so you can see progress. So you'll see in this staff report 2 attachments. The first is the previous goals that the committee followed, and then the second, and we have it on the screen for everyone's benefit, is staff's effort to change the format of the goals that were contained in the plan to something familiar to your historic preservation goals. Mm-hmm. So you will see that it includes all the goals contained in the plan. It highlights them based on priority, high, medium, and low, and color coordinates those. It provides the timeline as outlined in the plan, and then for your benefit, there's a column similar to your prior goals that shows updates. So this is what we would continue to update on a monthly basis for the committee's benefit. and I'll answer any questions.
Okay, are there any questions on the matrix?
I just had one comment about goal number 3.4. The dates, the timeline is 22 to 24. However, it seems like you're moving, ahead of that schedule. So does it matter?
It doesn't matter, we're just ahead on that one since that
Okay.
was a medium priority.
Okay. Thank you for also using these goals. They make more sense to me, at least.
Yeah, I think this was nicely done with the color coding. It does make it a lot simpler. Okay, any other comments?
All right, then you will see this monthly with updates.
Sorry, I had one more question. Does this have to go for approval to City Council?
No, because the committee has adopted the goals of the plan that was adopted by the council.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on. For possible action, discussion on possible revisions to the guidelines for the RDA Redevelopment Agency Historic Preservation Grant Program.
So, at last month's meeting, the committee asked to reevaluate the guidelines for the RDA grant program. Staff has provided a brief history since the adoption of these guidelines, both by the committee and the council, and has included in your packet the existing guidelines for committee discussion.
Okay, I know there was some concern about the lump sum. Does anyone have any comments of how we can improve this?
Well, I just had a couple thoughts on this here is that, the limitations that are put on this committee for okay and yes, no, basically, we've been told that we can only okay anything that's visible from the street. But yet, if you look at all the things that are eligible, I mean, it's just, it doesn't really fall under what we can say yay or nay to. If it doesn't affect the front of the building, I mean, mechanicals, includes, for just what they can get money for is plumbing, fire detection, suppression systems. I mean, that's all indoor stuff.
If I may, yes, you are right. The grant goes way beyond the guidelines. And I think just one thing to keep in mind is the adopted guidelines don't have anything to do with the grant program. The adopted guidelines, that applies to commercial as well as residential buildings, yes, as those were adopted in terms of what homeowners or business owners, what changes they can make and what triggers a review by the committee, even if the business, is not applying for a grant, yes, for purposes of the adopted guidelines, they pertain to changes that are visible from the street. So for instance, if a homeowner is doing an addition on the back of their house, it doesn't matter whether it matches the design of the house or not because nobody's going to see it. The grant program, at least the current grant program, is only for commercial businesses, and that's an entirely separate matter. It really, in effect, has very little to do with the adopted guidelines per se. It's a separate matter. So if the grant says that work inside a building is eligible for the grant, that's under the committee's purview because that's how the grant guidelines were adopted. But it doesn't have anything to do with the guidelines.
So it is the opportunity for the committee, and this is the incentive. When an applicant comes forward, the committee reviews the entire project, both interior and exterior, and makes a recommendation to the city council regarding eligibility of each of those items. With the most recent application that came before this committee, to help the committee in its evaluation, we included an assessment by Northwind, which looked at each element of what was being proposed for eligibility, and Northwind did their own determination as to which elements were following the Secretary of Interior standards and which were not, which deemed several of the elements of that project ineligible for reimbursement of those components. And so that is part of the committee's evaluation. And so the committee then, with that additional information, forwards on your recommendation to the council as to whether it meets the guidelines or not.
Okay, so then it's up to us then to limit how much money they have, or we just sort of put a rubber stamp of approval on what it's already been kind of processed?
Well, you're not looking at the dollar amount. What you're looking at is, does each of the proposed improvements meet the guidelines and the Secretary of Interior standards? And again, with the Secretary of Interior standards, that's why we included Northwind with their expertise to look at those different elements to provide you guidance. And with the most recent consideration by the committee, we laid it out in a checklist and said, this item's eligible, this item's not, this item's eligible. So you could follow along and either concur or, based on the committee recommendation onto the council, say, these are the items that are eligible for potential reimbursement.
Okay.
I have some comments,
Okay, Charlie, go ahead.
if it's my turn.
Sure.
Personally, I think there's so much wrong with this grant that it needs to be completely rewritten. There's a fundamental problem with it in that under the guidelines of this grant, you can take a building that is a contributing building and make it non-contributing and still get money for it. And I think that's absolutely opposite of what the grant's intended to do. The grant is intended to preserve buildings. To my knowledge, right now on Main Street, there's only 2 buildings that comply with, can be classified as contributing by Mooney. I think maybe there's 1 or 2 over on Avenue B. But the point is if a building has been classified by Mooney as contributing, then at the end of the day, no matter what was done to it, at the end of the day, it should still be contributing or they shouldn't get any money for it. I mean, what's the point of the grant if you're going to destroy the architectural integrity of a contributing building and the city's going to pay you for it? Doesn't make any sense. So I think at a very minimum, you've got to write this in a way that at the end of the day, the building has to be contributing. And I don't care whether it's an ADA. The Secretary of Interior Standards makes it very clear that there are ways to handle ADA in ways that would still allow a building to contribute. And if it can't be done, then, well, in the way they would do it, you wouldn't get a permit to do it. But at the very least, you shouldn't get any money for it. And it's the same with code requirements. There's, according to the SOI standards, and I can read them if you'd like me to, but I would just as soon not. But my point is, there are so many things wrong with this grant, that it needs to be completely rewritten. And I don't know what the best mechanism for us to do that is, because we can't, we could sit here and go through item by item, and I think we'd be here till midnight. We probably still wouldn't get anything done. But there's just line after line after line that is wiggle room for somebody to receive money for destroying the architectural integrity of a building, and I think that's wrong. This whole business of eligibility criteria, there's a problem right there. It implies that you can where's the sentence? All eligible work must comply, okay, with the Secretary of Interior standards. But it doesn't say that implies that the ineligible work doesn't have to comply with the Secretary of Interior standards. They can get money for it. I mean, they can't get money for it, but they can alter the integrity of the building. In other words, they cannot comply with the Secretary of Interior standards. They can't get money for it, but they can do it. So it just is over and over and over again. There's this dichotomy between the intent of the grant and what is actually done with it. And I think that needs to change. I mean, there are very few commercial buildings left in this town that are historic under the Mooney criteria, and I think those should be preserved. But you go right down the line, you go down Nevada Way, the Cantina and Tony's Pizza are the only two buildings on that street that comply with the Secretary of Interior standards according to Mooney, and would be. So I don't know. I just think this whole thing needs to be redone. It needs to be rethought. It's a great idea, and I'm all for it. But it needs to, like I say, at the end of the day, it needs to result in a project that maintains the architectural integrity of the building or the project that's being worked on, and this doesn't provide that. It doesn't. You get your money. You get $100,000 for making a building that was a perfectly good building and a perfectly preserved historic building, and change the front of it, and say, oh well, I don't want any money for changing the front of it, but I want $100,000 for doing all the other stuff. Well, you change the front of it and the building's no longer, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So that's my opinion, and now how we go about that, I don't know.
Well, I see a lot of notes on your copy here. I wonder if we could maybe submit some notes to the city staff of what they would recommend, to change this document, fiscal year 2019, 2020. What do you think?
I was going to suggest giving us 2 weeks to submit comments or changes, potential changes to this.
Okay.
And I don't know if, does everybody want to make comments, I guess, or should there be a small, group of 1 or 2 of us that get together and consolidate those comments, or not sure how?
Well, I think everybody probably can do their own. And then within 2 weeks, make sure that Michael Mays gets it. Go ahead, Glenn.
Well, as where I was going with this, the whole idea was primarily we're concerned, for people driving by and looking at buildings to keep the feel of the historic thing is, I'm thinking that, we want to take that money and encourage it basically for the visible parts of a building. I'm going to pick on a couple little things here. All right, somebody buys an old building. Okay, electrical, service distribution, and permanent lighting fixtures. I don't see where that falls under historic preservation. That would be up to somebody. They're buying a building, they need to upgrade their service and stuff like that. maybe they come under regular RDA funds, but the historic preservation funds, I think that should be just limited to basically the front of the building or the side of the building is visible from the street, i.e. doors, windows, facades, whatever. And whatever behind that front wall, that's a whole different ballgame. So he's buying an old building that needs a lot of renovation, needs mechanical and stuff like that. Should be up to the person that's buying the building in advance and not for being subsidized by historic preservation. Back when some of these buildings were built, well, there wasn't any AC, so why are we helping put AC in a building that never had AC when it was originally built? So I'm looking at, scale down all these eligible activities, basically just to, the front of the building, and then instead of being able, somebody will get $100,000, okay, well, we can allocate, here's $20,000 to this person to redo the front of their building, to bring it back into what it should have looked like, and possibly bring it back into a contributing building or whatever. And then what's behind that front wall, that's a whole different issue. And I think it gets away from what I think the intent was, in putting this all together. And what kind of our job here is historic preservation, it's, you're never going to be able to renovate one of these old buildings back to what it was when it was built. But I think we can bring the fronts of them back a little bit closer to what they were. And I think if that's where we put our efforts in, that's where we get the money, to these businesses to do that part. That's kind of where I'm going for. I mean, it's just, for removing that asbestos. I'm sorry, yeah, that's a hazard, but how is that historic preservation? If it's historic preservation, well, we want to put asbestos back in because that's what it had originally. We don't want to go down that road. But, just things of that nature. Elevators, repair, replacement, and installation. Well, that I think is the type of thing that, all right, if you're buying a building and it has an old elevator, needs to be refurbished, well, that's just part of the cost of doing business, of buying an old building, make sure the elevator works. It's, how many of our buildings had elevators when they were first built? I mean, that's kind of the direction I was going at when I, brought up bringing this back, and I think we scaled a lot of this stuff down, scaled back to just the basics of what we want. I think it'd be a lot less contention, in the future. I think it'd be a lot easier for this body, who, the current one and future ones, to deal with historic preservation, RDA, historic preservation funds, because we know what we want to do. We know what we're trying to do. We know what we're trying to encourage the owners of these buildings to do. Now, and we've got the regular RDA funds that are available to help people do things with their buildings. Well, that'd be from behind the front wall back, use RDA funds for all of this stuff, for the asbestos removal, for elevators, etc. That's kind of direction my mind was going about, revisiting some of this stuff. I might be way off base, but that's kind of, I think possibly this last 524 Nevada Way, I think a lot of us had real concerns about, well, we were kind of had to okay it, even though in our hearts we didn't want to. And I think that's where this conversation is coming from. Well, what can we do to prevent that from happening again, but at the same time encourage the business owners, stuff like that, to invest in the front of the buildings, to get them back to what they were or what they should be, or help to maintain them so that they can stay in a contributing part of the historic district. So that's kind of where my mind was going with this whole thing. So, I mean,
Okay, I have one question, Michael. The guidelines were for fiscal year 2019 to 2020. So do the guidelines change every year, or does it stay the same? How does it work?
No, this was the document that was reviewed by the committee and then sent to the council for adoption. That was that fiscal year. We just update the fiscal year, we don't change the guidelines.
Okay, so we've already reviewed this at one point.
Yes.
Okay, so we need to review it again. It sounds to me like I see some unhappiness with the guidelines. So I think, Blair, you suggested we get our changes into the city in 2 weeks.
That's my suggestion, and the way I like to work on something like this is not to ask questions, but to suggest changes.
Okay,
So
that's
if
fine.
you want to,
Yeah,
slash.
and this
and-
would probably be easier for you anyway, so that we could, so any changes that this committee has, then we need to have it to the city in 2 weeks. So, we don't get bogged down with it, and then, this gives them time, to look it over and process it so that we can look at it again. So, if you have changes to this document, fiscal year 2019, 2020, you need to submit them to the city in 2 weeks' time, or it's not gonna get done. So get your stuff together. Some of you made public comment now, but if you can take your public comment and write it down on paper. And I think we can work individually with that. So if you have, like, I see a lot of notes on yours, Ray, I don't know what you've done, but, oh, you wanna talk? Okay, go ahead. Okay.
Well, there's not much point in me repeating what, especially what Glenn said.
Okay,
But I think the main thing is the focus of these grants that we're putting out there should be the contributing historic features and simply that. So it should be easy to get rid of all that other stuff and just focus on the contributing features.
okay,
If I may, I think that probably one way of maybe possibly doing it, save a lot of time and effort, we could accomplish a lot of it right here, right now, where we can all talk and have input.
well, the
If
thought,
we,
the
because
thing of it
in
is.
2 weeks, we can't get together
Well,
and
we're
talk
not
and
gonna be able to
discuss.
get together anyway, because it turns into we can only do it in twos.
I know, that's what I mean,
Okay.
so, I might have some thoughts and stuff like that, but I can't talk to, let's say, Blair and Charles, and get
Yeah,
their
but that
opinions.
would probably go on for several hours, and I don't wanna do that as
Well,
chairman.
but like, what I'm thinking of is, all right, like, we go down this list of eligible things, things that would be easily, that we shouldn't have to worry about. All right, you cross off just, accessibility, ADA compliance, that would be on the person buying the building. It's got nothing to do with historic preservation.
Okay,
So
I have
historic preservation
another
funds shouldn't
comment.
go to that. Archaeological excavation, again,
Yeah,
that's
I
good.
understand where you're going, but now, if we submit those to you in 2 weeks on paper, is that gonna be a lot of work? I mean, as far as reading all that and compiling, or would you rather us do it in public like this?
Well, I guess it depends on how many comments. Certainly, it's easy to compile everything, especially if the comments are consistent. If
Okay.
there's conflicting comments, then we could, I guess, just highlight that with the comments received, this statement contradicts this statement, and then that's something the committee could resolve at the next meeting.
Okay, I would prefer to do it that way, and this would give everyone time to think about it. I know you've thought about it, but this gives you a chance to put it on paper, and it gives you 2 weeks, and we would do it individually, and it would go to the city, and then they would compile then, and then we would go over it again after it's been compiled. So that's what I would prefer we do. So,
So do you want to say a date? The
Yeah.
10th? The
the
12th?
10th of November? Okay,
So
what
the
is the
10th
10th? Monday, Tuesday?
The 10th is a Wednesday, which
Okay.
is 2 weeks from now.
Okay,
But why don't we make it Thursday, which is the last day of the work week for city staff?
Actually,
Okay.
that's a holiday.
oh, is it?
Which
November
is,
11th is,
oh, so 10th is your last day?
yeah.
Okay, that makes sense then.
So is the 10th okay with everyone? Okay, all right. So by November 10th, You will individually go through all of these guidelines, and if you want to see changes into the fiscal year 2021, we need to do it now. So you have 2 weeks to work on it, and make sure it's right, because that's going to go right to them, and then they'll compile it and then come back, and we'll look it over again. And they can see if there's similar thoughts, and if there's major changes, they can tell that in their work.
So can I make a suggestion that we
Yeah.
submit our comments
Okay?
to Michael or Susan?
Me is fine.
Okay, and that Michael will compile all of our comments into one document so that we can see them all at the same time.
Okay,
And then our next meeting, which is at the end of November, we can go through and determine what's common or not,
yeah,
where the discrepancies may be. Does that make sense?
yes, it does. Now, is that going to be kind of rushed for you, or is that a good timeline?
No, I can meet that timeline.
Can you? Okay,
And Madam Chair, if I could just clarify some of the comments I heard, and certainly you will incorporate those in the material you provide to us. But I think first and foremost, what I heard is that maybe one of the conditions should be that, if a property is contributing today, at the end of the project, it must continue to contribute. So that could address a lot of the concerns. Secondly, I think you need to think about, if contributing is important, does that mean that this grant program would no longer be eligible for a historic property that's not contributing to the district in the future? That's the other thing that you need to consider.
yeah, that's another, you did mention that in the other grant.
And I think that's exactly the way it ought to be. I mean, why are we gonna, well, there would be the case where if the owner has a property that has been classified by Mooney as non-contributing, and if they're willing to do the work to upgrade that to contributing, then certainly they would be.
Exactly.
But if they take a building that is contributing and make it non-contributing, or if they take a building that is contributing or non-contributing and don't make it contributing, then why would they get any money?
Yeah,
Well, that's kind of part of where I was going at with that, because we make the grant program, available to people and encourage them to bring them back, and they're not worried about all the other stuff, they're just worried about the front, the front of the building, okay, and if you give somebody $25,000 for them to restore the front of the building, they might be able to bring it, for that kind of money, I would think that a lot of small business would probably be able to really bring something like that back into being a contributing building to the historic, to the historic district. I mean, that's kind of where I was trying to get to, is where we're encouraging people to keep them historic or possibly bring them back by, and get rid of all the hoopla, get rid of all the stuff, and just say, hey, this is what we can do. We can, we're going to help you with the doors and the windows, and we're going to help you with any facades. We can help you with that stuff. You put $50,000 up, you can get $25,000 of it back just for doing the front of your building. That's kind of the direction I was kind of going with my thoughts and stuff. So that's.
we understand.
Yeah.
We understand, and I think we have a good solution. So if you, Glenn, just take your time, go through it. You have 2 weeks. Submit it to Michael, and anyone else that would like to submit a paper, paper suggestions, let's put it that way, to the city staff, then you have 2 weeks to do so, and that will be, the deadline is November 10th.
I have a question, Michael. The first come, first served basis, is that something we can also comment on? Because I'm just wondering, that was another problem with, somebody coming in and swooping in and grabbing all the money at the very beginning of the year. Is it possible to change that criteria to be, perhaps maybe it's open for a certain amount of time, and it allows a number of people to apply for the grant, and then basically the city, the or whoever is competing, those projects are competing against each other in a sense. And we're approving multiple projects perhaps at one time.
That certainly could be a criteria, but one of the things you'd want to keep in mind, and this is based on my experience with the RDA program overall, is that if that's the criteria, then people are submitting projects and then they're waiting. They're waiting several months until others may or may not submit for that fiscal year. And what we've found is that's a disincentive to going through this process if they have to wait a long time before proceeding with the grant program. This all goes back to an incentive. You're trying to encourage people to look at a historically significant property and preserve it, to maybe take on a property that would otherwise be more expensive as opposed to a newer building.
True.
But it helps to encourage reinvestment in our historical district, and so that's why this program was created in the first place. So I think looking at objectives that still provide that incentive, but accomplish your goals, like you said, with maintaining the historical integrity or contributing factor of that building to the district, balancing that so that it does continue to incentivize people to restore historically significant properties.
So but another question in regarding the review timeline. Is the role of the Historic Preservation Committee to approve or not approve the application?
It is to provide a recommendation on the application and its eligibility with the guidelines.
So is the so this committee recommends approval or not, or other recommendations?
So with the last example, we had the checklist, and the committee, as we represented, could agree with Northwind's determination of what was eligible and not eligible, or you could say, these are the items that we support for reimbursement based on the material provided.
So it's multiple approvals that we can provide.
Multiple approvals.
We can either approve the historic preservation consultant's recommendations.
You could say, we support items 1 through 6, but not 7, and 9 and 10, but not the rest. And that's your recommendation of the council.
So we can't say we recommend or we approve if there's 10 items, we approve all 10 items as well as we approve the project.
If you feel, and I think this is the discussion with the guidelines, if you feel it's not meeting the criteria for the guidelines, then you don't recommend approval.
Okay. Okay, so we are approving or not approving the project?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though we don't vote on it, we still have a recommendation.
It is a
Recommend.
recommendation.
Yeah.
The intent is the applicant's coming before you, and you're evaluating its compliance with the guidelines and the overall intent to encourage preservation of historical properties within the district and within the RDA. And if you feel that it's not meeting that criteria, that's your recommendation to the council.
And are you assuming, or can we assume that the historic preservation consultant will be part of the timeline process?
Yes, that is, as we used with the last example, we would use the consultant to evaluate each of these grant applications and do the exact same thing, show you which of the items are meeting the Secretary of Interior standards and which aren't.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Is everyone happy now?
No,
No? Charlie, you have another comment?
no, I have another comment.
Well, I've got
Write it
a,
all down.
Okay, good.
I've
That's
got
what
a-
we want you to do.
I got a
Okay.
comment again, going along kind of with Blair's a little bit. I think, one of the things I think we need to probably talk about, it's not real broken down in here, is but I think we need to, because we're looking at possibly scaling back the scope of a project, then let's also scale back the amount of money one business to get, like, you know, let's say maximum of $25,000. Okay, that at least opens it up that the potential for 4 businesses to get, you know, in one fiscal year, as compared to this past year, we got one business, got the whole cake. And so everybody else that might have been thinking about something is left out. But I think because if we scale back the scope of any project, they won't need the huge amounts of money. If they're getting $25,000, well, and they put up $25,000, that's $50,000 just to work on the front of a building. That's a lot of money for just the front of a small building. And I think if we kind of go that direction, I think that gets us back into more what we're.
I got to say one other thing here,
Okay.
because I think if I own a business downtown here somewhere, and let's say I just bought it, and I'd like to make a donut shop, but it's going to cost me $200,000 to do whatever is necessary to make the donut shop. But I want to restore the front of the building, okay? But the front of the building's only going to take $5,000. But if I only get $5,000, I can't do the project because I need help. And I think the intent of this is to provide help to somebody to make a building that is a viable business. But it has to maintain. So I don't have any problem with having a list of eligible and ineligible categories. It's just that at the end of the day, you have to have a building that is classified by Mooney as contributing to the architectural integrity of the district. Now, if it takes them $50,000 to do the inside of the building so that they can be a viable business, then I don't have any problem with that.
Well, that's where I think the regular RDA funds come into play.
And I don't have any problem with somebody getting $100,000. If they're the only ones that applied for the grant, and you say, oh, well, nobody else has applied, but we're only going to give you $25,000. What do we do with the $75,000 that's just sitting there? So I don't know. I don't want to go down that street. I mean, but.
Okay, well,
I'd like to make a comment, please, if I may.
oh, okay, go ahead, Ray.
So I agree with Glenn. I think I said this originally, it's too much money for one project. I'd be good with 50% or maybe a third, because just that money all going to the first person that applies for it. I mean, like you said, it doesn't take that much money. The water filtration plant got a brand new roof for $50,000. All right, so that's a huge building compared to most of these buildings that we're talking about. So I agree with Glenn. I just want to throw that out there.
Okay.
Can I
well,
ask a question?
You want to ask the staff a question?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
sure.
Does the regular RDA allow for code or funding for code improvements?
The regular RDA is only for exterior improvements, with the exception of life safety. It's more limited in the types of things that can be eligible for reimbursement.
Okay. That's one thing I will maybe agree with Glenn on, is I don't think that this fund or grant should be awarded for bringing buildings up to code. I think that's just a general responsibility of the homeowner or the property owner, except in the case where if that code is going to impact the architectural integrity of the building, and if they need something to mitigate that work on a building to bring it up to code, then I can see paying for that part of code, bringing a building up to code. But I think that's one of the things that I think we could take out of here, to reduce the amount of money that goes to code or bringing a building up to code, whatever that means. But
Okay, like I said before, if you have things that you want to change on this document, it needs to be submitted in writing to the city staff by November 10th. And I know we haven't gotten to the next item yet, but That grant does specify that it does give a maximum amount, and I guess we can talk about that in the next item. But please, if you have that feeling about how much money is going to be spent, please put that down in writing so that they can process it, and then we can see what everybody thinks, okay? Okay, I think we can make that work. Okay, any other comments? Okay, hearing none, then we'll move on to the next item. For possible action, discussion and direction regarding the city's proposed residential preservation grant.
So with the City Council's approval of this year's budget, it included $100,000 for a grant that would be for eligible residential structures within the historic district. One of the things the council recognized is that the RDA program only benefits commercial properties because those are the properties in the RDA. The remainder of the historic district is not in the RDA and not eligible. And so they authorize $100,000. Staff has put together guidelines for this program, and those guidelines are in front of you for your consideration. Staff has also identified several questions as the committee is evaluating these guidelines. Should the grant apply to both interior and exterior improvements? Should both contributing and non-contributing properties be considered eligible for the grant program? Does the committee want to consider using grant funds to encourage individual nominations of local homes to the National Register? So those are just some questions, and it's an opportunity for the committee to provide input on the guidelines.
Okay, so hearing the committee questions from the staff, 1, 2, 3, do you have any comments about that?
May I?
Do.
So for the questions that I'm concerned with, question 1, both interior and exterior, I say no. I think we need to keep it to the exterior contributing features in an effort to increase that, because we've fallen so far below the threshold for qualification for the National Register. So I think that we should limit it to the exterior. Should contributing and non-contributing properties be considered? Yes. Especially, we want to encourage people, as was said earlier, to bring back some of the lost features. And so I would say yes to both interior and exterior. I mean, to non-contributing and contributing on that one. And does the committee want to consider using grant money to encourage individual nominations? I don't really have an opinion on that right now. And one thing I'd like to throw out there, it wasn't asked, but in the event, so we have the possibility for 10 grants. In the event that we have 5 or 6 people apply for those grants and there's a pool of money left over, I was wondering, would it not be prudent for us as a committee to sort of identify some properties around town that could be brought back into compliance, or the contributing features brought back, and perhaps approach homeowners and let them know, hey, there's some money available, and we realize that your home is considered non-contributing. However, if you are interested, there's this money, and you might possibly restore the porch or with windows or whatever it might be. Is that something that we could do you think?
Well, I think as part of this program, promoting it to the property owners within the district is part of the objective. Mm-hmm. Now, every year it's going to be different potentially as the number of applications, and even though we put down a $10,000 maximum, you may have an application that may only ask for $5,000. So we're not going to know at any given time how much is remaining. But I think certainly you promote this to property owners to encourage them to look at addressing those issues, and that's the intent of this program.
Yeah, well, I would encourage us to do that, maybe to start, identifying the low-hanging fruit, so to speak.
Can I ask, Michael, can I ask you a question? All right, there's $100,000 set aside for this program. I've just got a quick question. If, let's say we only use 50,000 of it in a given year, does the other 50,000, would that roll over into the next year? Or is it one of those use it or lose it? I mean, so that the following year would, if we only use 50,000 this year, could we roll over the leftover 50,000 the next year? Now there'd be 150,000 available the following year.
Yeah, no, it's use it or lose it. So every year, the city council, as part of their budget process, will reevaluate the funding for this. They could decide, based on prior year's activities, to increase it. If there's been a lot of people that are interested in this program, they may decide to authorize a higher amount. It will depend each year, as they're making their policy decisions on budget, what the dollar amount will be for the next fiscal year.
Okay, the reason I was kind of asking is, I mean, if we get this started, there might take a little while for it to ramp up and get enough people interested in it, and then once people start seeing it happening, little word of mouth gets around, hey, hey, Mabel, did you know I got money from the city to redo the front of my house? You should apply too. And hopefully, the second year of it, let's say the first year we get 5 people, and hopefully the second year we'd get 10 people, and the third year we'd get 15 people. And that's what I was wondering, if the potential for the money to roll over, but if the city they would just reevaluate it each year based on projected requests,
Yes.
basically? Okay, thank you.
I think Ray had a great idea. I think that's exactly what we should be doing, is that kind of thing. I don't know exactly how we go about doing it, but I think it should be done, so yeah.
Okay.
Can I offer another proposal then, that we have until the 10th to offer suggestions and changes for the city to consolidate for our next, and then provide to the committee at our next historic preservation meeting?
Yeah, okay. Well, we're going to do the same thing then with the Historic Preservation Grant Program, fiscal year 2021 and 2022. So if you have any suggested changes that you want to submit to the city staff, you have until November 10th to submit that. So you have homework. We have 2 grants that we're going to be looking carefully at. And so just get those ideas and suggestions in by November 10th.
So I did want to ask of the committee, or offer a discussion regarding interior work. I do think that this grant would benefit interior work if it was truly used for the restoration, preservation of historic interiors.
Oh, the interior, because this only says for exterior, right? That's what
No,
is that right,
she's-
Michael? That,
This is one of the questions we were asking the committee.
you want us to comment? Okay, because it seems to me when I was reading it, it just said it was for exterior. I might be wrong.
So
Okay.
this is a question that applies to both this grant as well as the previous RDA grant. And I think it's incumbent on us to establish guidelines for interior work as to what does that apply to. It can't be for reorganizing the interior of a house so that somebody can put a 50 square foot TV
Yeah.
and move columns and doors out of the way or out of their original configuration. It's for the restoration and preservation of existing historic material and configurations of the interior. And let me also suggest, Glenn, when you say the front of the building, what's generally used is the exterior of the building, and it's viewable to the public. So that sides of the building are should also be considered, because
right. I
they're
was just
viewable to the
kinda- just
public,
kinda-
but
I
not
was-
just the front.
Yeah, I was just being general, because basically we're talking about street view. You know, it'd be, so it'd be, whether it be the side of the building or the roof of the building, I mean, just basically the visible part. Okay. I should have been more clear on that.
Okay. All right, so is everybody on board then with November 10th? To submit your changes or additions?
So our response is going to hopefully answer your questions. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, moving on then. Okay, discussion regarding activities for the Historic Preservation Event and Award for 2022. Okay, I see where the staff has put together some things. And so tonight, we need to decide when we're going to have the actual event. As you know, we have to plan, so it would be good if we made a decision on what day it will be. And as you know, as in the packet it said, well, in the past we've done it the second Saturday in May, which would be this year, May 14th. So is everyone okay with May 14th?
So I think the question is, the reason we got away from a single day was because of, for the most part, COVID. Do we think that we're going to have to deal with COVID next year? And
Yeah.
do we spread out the event or not? So I
Well-
don't know if one day, I mean, I think we could be flexible. It could be one day, but it could also be throughout the month,
Well, I think,
whatever it is.
yeah, I think what I'm looking at and thinking is it would be one day, and that would be May 14th, and that would be, flexible. If in fact we had a huge scare with COVID again, we could always go to a video, like we did the year that we had problems. But I'd like to see the event come back, and it looks like business-wise and things are opening up, even if it's in a red flare. For example, Clark County is in a red flare, but we've been instructed to wear masks and get vaccinations, and they keep us updated on the situation. So I'd like to see us do a full day on May 14th. How does everybody else feel?
I'm good with that.
Okay. Everybody else?
I don't know what you're planning for the day, but it doesn't matter to me.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we can, May 14th is good as any.
Okay, so then we're gonna go ahead and plan for May 14th. Now, if you look on page 39, they've given us two options today, and I think this is really wise because this is gonna come up really fast. So I'm glad that we're discussing it now. So we have two options. As you know, we have to get the utility mailers ready. That's important. I know, Blair, you worked on that last year. Did you want to kind of help again with that, or?
If you can come up with an event, I'm happy to help with that.
Okay, I think we have an event kind of sketched out, so we need to decide whether we want to go with option one, which means the flyers will go out in the utility mailers in February, or we go with option two, which means the flyers go out in January. So, okay, now she gave us an example in your packet of 2021, and that was the last time that we had, a full-blown day planned, and so we would have to get that flyer ready.
Actually, for 2021, you didn't have an event. That flyer was just for announcing the award.
Okay, so it was 2020 when we had it then. Okay.
Correct.
So, yeah.
And that was canceled due to COVID.
Yeah, that was canceled, and then last year we had the video canceled because the owner didn't want their property being featured, so that was all changed too. So we're gonna have to do a flyer, so, do you want it in February, or do you want it in March? Let's see,
Madam
January
Chair.
or February? Yeah, go ahead.
As Blair noted, the issue is deciding on what you're going to do for event, because staff will provide a draft flyer, and in the end, whatever goes in the utility mailer is subject to the approval of, other people. So it can't be exactly necessarily what the committee may want, but staff will work with each other to come up with a draft flyer, depending on what the committee plans to have for an event.
Okay. All right, well then, let's put that on hold then, and I'm gonna bring up some things that I've been working on. Now, if you did see the notes that I had in there, someone did say that the notes were hard to read, but I'll kind of go with you to see how this is gonna go. So what Ray and I met today, and I do have some notes from that, which I left in the car, so I'm gonna just wing it, okay? So we would have an opening at the LA Water and Power Building.
I've got some notes here.
Oh,
If you'd
that's all
like.
right, you pipe in.
Would you like?
Yeah, just pipe in.
You brought up a plein air event featuring the historic hotel, and you talked to Diana Meyer about that, and you asked me if I would talk to her further about that, seeing as I
Right.
helped organize the last one. We talked about possibly at the LA Water and Power Building having historic art. And the question was, could the people who are displaying historic art, they might be the museum, it might be the museum that's bringing in some items, and or it might be the History and Arts Foundation with some historic roof tile art left over from a project. Would they be able to, I'm assuming you would only be able to display them. The question is, would they be able to provide things for sale at our Historic Preservation Day?
Yeah, that was one question we had. What we're gonna do is
Or
have
just viewing?
tables for the museum, for the Historic Preservation Committee, for the Art Guild, and your organization, Ray.
History and Arts Foundation.
Yeah, so those 4 tables would be on display at 9, but then we were thinking that if the city doesn't want us to sell anything or want those 2 groups to sell, then we could just have them on display with business cards, and then they could go and talk to the people that have things for sale, between the Art Guild and the Historic Committee.
The whole concept of having vendors selling things on city property, that's done with special events all year long, both inside and outside. They would have to make sure that they have the appropriate business licenses, and that it would be tied to the special event overall.
Okay, do we
So-
get those licenses at the district, or it comes through the city?
Business licenses are with
city.
finance department downstairs, yes.
Okay,
But I believe we still do have to fill out a special event form.
Correct.
As a committee, because I had to do that before. So would they fall under that special event?
It would
Or
all
they
be
have to
part
have
of
their
this.
own?
Yeah, it'd
Okay.
be all part of the special event.
All right, that's
okay, well,
great.
that's good news.
Okay.
That's very good news. Okay, so at 9 o'clock then we would open, and we discussed having coffee and donuts, making it very simple. And so Ray has a contact at Starbucks for coffee, and then we would just purchase donuts, which I think they're $12 a dozen or something like that at Albertsons. So there wouldn't be a lot of money involved to have coffee and donuts. And then there, they would get their maps and an agenda of what's going on for the day. And what we have done is broken it up to businesses downtown. For example, the LA Water and Power Building is right in the middle of town. So they would be able to walk to the Browder Building, where hopefully we haven't contacted, well, we made an initial contact to Dennis McBride, but he hasn't gotten back to us and we didn't have a firm date yet. So we made a contact to Dennis McBride and we have him at the Browder Coffee House and Bookstore. And I've already talked to Travis, the owner. Well, there's 3 owners, but he told me that he would supply coffee and they would sponsor that. And then we would have Dennis's books there and people can, purchase them if they'd like. But he would give a lecture on his books and that would go from 9 to 10. So they would come to us at the LA Water and Power Building. Also the Plenary Session, which I've already talked to Diana Meyer from the Art Guild, and she was okay with it, and Ray's gonna follow through because he works with the Art Guild quite often. So, Diana, oh. I'm sorry. You want me to speak up?
No, I just don't understand who Diana Meyer is and what that
Okay.
has to do with the plenary session on what?
Yeah. Diana Meyer is associated with the Art Guild, and she would be responsible for setting up the plenary session to paint the Boulder Dam Hotel. As you recall, a couple of years ago, we had the water filtration plant painted. So they like to do that. They love to paint, and so they would just set up a day where they'd come out with their easels and paint the Boulder Dam Hotel. And then we would jury it, and the Art Guild would be responsible for the awards. We would give first, second, and third place, and the Art Guild would manage all of that. And that's going to be on display at the LA Water and Power Building at 9 o'clock. That will have already been done maybe 2 weeks before, and when the public arrives, they can make a vote on the art, and we've chosen the Boulder Dam Hotel for that. Now, we'll have these 4 tables up that will be on display, and then hopefully every table will have a representative from their organization to talk to people with brochures and whatever they have to share with the public. And then we'll kind of work on the business license also to make sure that they can sell properly. So from there, they come and have coffee and donuts there and just see the artwork and vote on it. And then they have options. And we would, from 9 to 10, we would be at the Browder bookstore. And I'm also, I have a contact at the DAR, and I'm going to ask them if they can do Ida Browder again out in front of the Browder business, and have some bookmarks about her and dress up in Ida Browder. So that would be from 9 to 10. And then from 10 to 11, we made contact with Tiana. What's Tiana's last name? Marie. Okay, Tiana Marie. And it's funny, Ray and I were meeting about Preservation Day, and we ran into Tiana. So Charlie had shared with me that she has a new book that she's written, and on Boulder City, and she showed it to us. It has a lot of illustrations, and I'm sure those pictures are from the museum, so it's probably quite interesting. I don't know how much her book sells for, but she told me the publicity went out in August. So I think I was on vacation, I missed it in the paper, but she agreed this morning to come and be with us from 10 to 11, and that would be held at the Boulder Dam Hotel. Now, she has to talk to her board about selling her book, but we're going to let her handle that part. And then from 11 to 12, we did talk to Tara. What's Tara's last name? At the company store? Okay. Tara, yeah. We talked to Tara Batoli this morning, and she would love to have us at her business, the company store. As you know, she is a historic property that's been redeveloped and now has a business. If you've been in there, it's quite interesting and it's beautifully done. I think she was up for an award a couple years ago. But she was more than happy to have us come, and she actually has a room in the back. It's an event room, and she said we could use it. There would be no charge. Now, the only thing, I haven't talked to her yet about coffee, but I think we probably would have enough budget to just buy the coffee from her. And then people can just buy a Danish or something if they want to. But that would go from 11 to 12 at the Boulder City Company store at the event room. Okay, and then they would have the option, which will be on the flyer that we do for this event. We would come back to the LA Water and Power Building, and we would have a panel discussion. Ray and I talked about this before, and he suggested that, and I think it's a good one, that we do a panel discussion on the historic preservation code that's coming up. It's in ad hoc right now. So what I was thinking about was having Blair be the moderator, since she's been attending those meetings and she knows a lot. She would be our moderator, and she would be asking the questions, and we would have Ray there. I know, Ray, but you're important. Ray's gonna do a tour at the water treatment plant, but I'm gonna have him come back by 11. You're gonna have to close off at 11 so that you can be back to the panel discussion. So, okay, so the panel discussion would be Blair as moderator, Ray would be on the panel, and I was thinking maybe, Michael, you should, because you've been attending those meetings, correct? So you would have the information proper, you know what I mean? If you understand what I mean, like, yeah, okay.
The proposed ordinance.
Yeah. So then we would have Michael on there, and then I was thinking about having Howard Adams, who's been on the committee from the inception of the committee, and he's also representing the council. So Howard is his name, I think, that's on the... James. Oh, James Adams. For some reason I wanted to call him Howard. It's James. Okay, so... Oh, it's his middle name? Okay, that's why I wanted to call him that. So Howard James Adams would represent that committee for the council. So I think it might be quite educational. As you know, that's part of our outreach, is to be educational. And this would give the public a chance to hear what's going on and then ask questions too. You know, as Blair will, you'll kind of guide the discussion, but then we can open it up to a few questions, not too many, but some. And this would help a better understanding of that. And then one thing I'm gonna have to work on is lunch. And a couple years ago, we did a dam worker box, and that was provided by the Dillinger. And I think that went through the museum, though. The museum paid for it, but the Dillinger put the box together. And so I'm gonna approach Grant Turner to see if he would be our sponsor for the dam worker box. And we would maybe supply 50 lunches. And those would be free of charge because our sponsor would pay for it, the Dillinger. And then we also are going to approach Jill Lagan at the chamber, and Ray is going to write a letter. Well, we will write a letter together, but Ray's going to be our point person with Jill. And what we want to do is ask the local businesses if they can put together some kind of historical lunch. And it can be a special. So, I mean, it could be anything they want. it would just be something that they would offer the public that day. And then we were hoping too that maybe some of the businesses could dress up in period costume for on the 1930s. So I think we've got everything pretty much planned. We just have to make sure Dennis can be there and Michael Green, the company store. Go ahead.
So I did hear back from Dennis, and Dennis won't be able to
He won't?
participate.
Okay.
However, Dr. Michael Green, I contacted him too.
Okay.
And he said, depending on the date and his schedule, he would love to be involved.
Okay.
And he said that he's the director of Preserve Nevada. So if he can't be involved, he said that the history department there will probably do something in relation to the day or come up with
Okay.
some way to contribute, I guess.
Okay, so it looks like Dennis can't be with us. So, okay, so the Browder Bookstore, we'll have to rethink that. So, like I said, we're a little flexible, so maybe we could put Preserve Nevada into the slot for Browder Bookstore. Ray? Okay,
Possibly, yeah, we'll have to talk more about it, I guess.
okay,
See if they have any ideas.
Can I suggest
go
something?
ahead, yeah.
So either Michael Green or Courtney Mooney, I would suggest instead of sticking them in a building to just chat, that they be part of the panel.
Okay, so we've got 3 panelists.
Well,
Would
so just.
he could maybe take
Generally,
Michael's
a
place?
panel is, I mean, it depends on what
We could have 4.
You could have as many as you want on a panel, but
Okay.
the point of the panel is to convey what's going on or what does the code
Right.
mean, right?
Exactly.
And so Ray is, I guess I'm thinking he's representing a nonprofit preservation organization. Michael is representing the city. James is representing the city council. And then either Courtney or Michael Green, they're like professional preservationists. So it'd be good to have one or both of them on the panel.
Okay. Would you contact Courtney Mooney for us?
I can, unless you want to put Michael Green in that position.
Well, depending on if Michael Green comes or not. Yeah. Oh, you want him to do both?
We can have both or not. That's just a suggestion. You guys are making the plans.
Well,
The moderator
Michael-
is just moderating. I'm just going to go around and say, what's your opinion? So a moderator doesn't necessarily provide input. Then I'm not a moderator.
No, but Michael Green,
You want him to be the moderator.
not involved in the preservation code, so what would he be?
He's got a professional background in historic preservation.
Right, but I mean, with what we're presenting to the public, so he's not even familiar with it. But
He can read it and become familiar with it.
maybe you should talk to Michael.
I can
Well-
talk to Michael, but you guys need to realize,
Convey all that to him tonight.
you guys need to realize a moderator is somebody that doesn't participate in the discussion. They're moderating.
Exactly.
So you guys need to make a decision who's the moderator, and if
Oh,
you
I
want
would
me to
prefer-
talk to,
I would prefer that you'd be the moderator, Blair.
got it.
Okay. All right, so Blair's the moderator, and then it would be really nice if we could get Courtney, because Courtney has worked with us directly. So, it would be really nice if we could get Courtney.
Well, I will talk to Michael about that, because I don't know if that would be something part of her.
Would that be a conflict of interest, or?
That's not my question. It's not a conflict. Would it be part of her duties or not? And if it's not, then it would be a request, an invitation on behalf of
Right.
the city or not. I don't know.
I can ask.
Thank you.
Okay, when you say you're gonna ask, who are you gonna ask?
Courtney.
Courtney, okay. All right, then we'll have Michael ask Courtney if she can be part of our panel. Okay, we would have to ask Howard James Adams. Does anybody, you know him? Okay. All right, so I think we kind of have it covered. Ray is also going to open up the water treatment plant and have a tour. That seems to be very popular. I know in the last 4 or 5 years that we've been working on the water treatment plant. We've had we've had a lot of public participation, like about 100 people, coming through there.
Good bit over 100, I think.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of interest.
What time is he be?
Well, we're gonna put him at the water treatment plant from 9 to 11. And I want him back at the LA Water and Power Building for the panel discussion. I think he's very important to that.
No, that's
code.
fine, I just wanted to know when he was gonna be
Yeah,
there,
yeah. So he's gonna be.
9 to 11?
Yeah, at the water treatment plant. And then he'll have time to clean up and get back for the panel discussion. And then-
Madam Chair, just one thought came to me regarding
Yeah.
the panel discussion.
Yeah,
You've identified 3 of the 4 members of the ad hoc committee being a part of this panel discussion, either as a moderator or on the panel.
yeah.
I think that would be a concern about quorum without a meeting.
Okay, I never thought of it. Okay, very good. Okay, so then, are
Who's out? James?
technically, you are not on that.
No, I'm a staff person.
Okay,
Councilmember Adams and members Turner and Davenport are all 3 members of the ad hoc committee. So that's
Okay.
3 of the 4, and that would be a quorum.
so we could have 2. Okay. All right, we're gonna have to rethink this, so, we can have our choice. We can have, Ray Turner and Howard James on the committee, or Ray and Blair as moderator, and then we'd have to find another, panel speaker. So how do you guys wanna do it?
Can I suggest you figure it out? Like
you want me
amongst
to?
yourselves? I
Okay.
mean, you and James talk to each other perhaps?
Okay,
Because, I mean, unless you want somebody else to be a moderator.
I think
I
James
can-
will be happy to have me do it, so, but
Okay.
I'll talk to him anyway.
okay, so then, if there's 3 people, so we're gonna have to eliminate 1. So,
I just suggested Ray and James will duke it out and figure out which one of them is going to be on it.
okay, so then we'll reduce it to 3 instead of 4.
Yeah, Lynn's getting at is who's going to replace that person.
Yeah, we can increase it to 4, or we can reduce it to 3. Okay, so you want us to figure it out? Okay, all right, Ray and I will work on it then. And, okay, is that kind of clear to everybody about the day? Because that is kind of what we had in mind to do.
You did forget, wow, there was
Did I
one more
forget?
thing, was Charlie.
Oh, that's right. Charlie, you were in my notes on the, but thank you. Charlie has a tour of Avenue B, and we were thinking that, and it depends on Charlie, about doing it in the afternoon, but Ray said that it might get kind of warm out there. You know, it's up to you. Would you mind doing it in the afternoon?
No, I don't mind. I'm hoping it would be kind of
In May? It might be kind of mild still.
90 would be good.
You like 90?
What time do you want Charles to do that?
Well, I think we could do the afternoon as a tour on Avenue B, and then we could just let it open. You know, we'll be kind of done after lunch at the LA Water and Power Building. We'll kind of close up there, but we'll have Charlie's tour of Avenue B from 1 to 3 or 1 to 2.
Yeah, what was
1:30?
What did we do last time?
one tour?
Well,
Pretty strenuous, isn't it?
yeah, but how long was that one we did that?
Over an hour.
It was a
You could
little
trim it
over an
down.
hour, wasn't it? Yeah, so an hour anyway, yeah, it takes an
Like
hour.
1:30 to
Well,
3?
Yeah, whatever your
Okay.
last event is, or whatever.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
call
we
it
would
an hour,
have
call it
lunch.
an hour and
Yeah, an hour. I mean, if it goes a little longer, because there isn't gonna be another tour, so you aren't.
Only one
yeah,
tour.
Yeah, so,
Okay, well, let's start it at 1:30, because that gives people time to, if they're gonna come and have lunch with us and hear the panel discussion, that'll give them time to go to Avenue B and get on the tour, so, yeah, I think you could start at 1:30 comfortably.
yeah, no, that's fine, yeah.
Okay, now, is there anything else that I forgot, Ray? I don't have my notes with me.
I suggested we reach out to Ray White about giving a little talk at the water filtration plant, and that's it.
Okay. Yeah, Ray suggested that when, on the tour of the water filtration plant, that he was gonna ask Ray White. Evidently, Ray has some kind of drama where he talks about the plant at that time, is that correct? Yeah. Okay, so, and evidently it's very good. I haven't seen it, but it's highly recommended, so we would do that during the water filtration time between 9 and 11. Okay, so we kind of have it all sketched out. We have a little bit to firm up. But I think we can comfortably type this out so that it's in type form instead of my messy handwriting.
Linda, can I
Yeah.
suggest one thing on the tour? Don't do Avenue B, just call it the Avenues, because I'm
Okay,
hoping that I can add, the next block, maybe C and D, or
okay,
some combination of, but, so we just say the Avenues.
okay. Did you want some kind of brochure on that? To be handed out like in the morning?
Well, we have one if we did the same thing that we did 2 years ago.
Oh, you have one?
If we, yeah, we'd have to change it up a bit. I mean, the brochure was just a mimeographed thing, although it actually was, let me think about that. I think given the circumstance, perhaps maybe we could just have a handout with, let me think about that, okay?
Okay.
Because it takes a fair amount of,
Well, Charles, what if you just did a repeat of that last tour that you did there and use the same handout? I mean, it was a very informative little
Did you
tour.
go?
yeah, well,
So,
we could do that, right, but on the other hand.
You've already done all the work for that one, so just do a repeat.
Except I forgot everything we did.
You got the handout, just reread it.
I just reread it.
Charlie, if you're
Anyway,
gonna,
we'll do, yeah.
I'm sorry, if you're gonna revise or do a different tour, let me know and I'll help you with the handout.
Okay, yeah. Well,
Okay, oh, great. All right, so Blair's gonna help you.
And just a note, anything that gets handed out regarding the event, it will have to be, submitted to the city, as well.
Okay, thank you, Susan. All right, so is everybody clear with the event that we have planned?
So if you want my help with the flyer,
Yeah,
I'll need kind of like so if you look at the year before last or maybe 2 years ago, an example of the flyer,
yeah, well, they give us this one.
that was
This
not
is
from last year.
2021. Okay, I have to look it up. Well, Susan, do you have that easy access to the flyer from the year previous?
The one that had like the dates, or I mean the times of and where things were, and then there was a little map included, I think. I don't know.
Right, do you just want me to email that to all the committee, or I'm sorry, what's the request?
Could you email that copy of that example of the flyer that had the schedule for the day event to Linda?
Okay,
And then she can revise it to this
Okay.
event.
Sure.
okay.
And then
Thank you.
Yeah, I would assume, Susan and Michael, that you would start getting us ready, like putting that in the agenda so that we kind of see it on the timeline. Do you want me to come in, Susan, after I get that? And
Yeah, I mean, considering, I know you don't really do email, and I'm assuming you don't have a computer to type on?
well, I have to go to the library right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I will attempt to draft up something based on what you said here tonight as a rough
Okay.
draft, so that, and then if need be, what we can do before the next meeting, since the idea is that hopefully you'd be approving basically the flyer content at your next meeting, is that I can meet with you in the meantime.
Okay.
To go over that, to make sure I've got,
Got every
what you
detail
have
right.
in mind for that.
Okay, all right, that would be fine, and I prefer to have a phone call so that we can meet together. Okay, well, I think we're well on our way.
So do we need to choose an option?
Yes, we do, thank you.
I choose option 1 because I like the fact that the flyer is going out a little later in February rather than in January.
Okay. How does everybody else feel? Okay, all right, so then we'll go with the city's option 1. And the flyer will be ready to go out in the utility mailers. By the way, I did appreciate the last month's utility mailer, and it does include the Historic Preservation Committee with the new landscaping program. It'll have to come before us, so that was very nice. I like that very much. So I guess we'll see that when we see it. But this flyer will be ready by February 2022.
So do we need to talk about the award?
Well, okay, we can. Why don't we?
I suggest that we do the same thing that we did last year.
Okay. Well, how about we talk about are we meeting in November?
On November 30th.
Okay, so we are, okay. So could we wait and talk about the award November 30th?
Of course, it's going to be a standing agenda item, until the event and the award.
Okay. Why don't we talk about the award on November 30th? Is that okay with everyone?
So what do we want to talk about? I think one of the questions is, are we okay with the award criteria?
Yeah, that's going to have to
Requirements.
go on. Does some of that go on the flyer, Blair?
It goes online, and so
Okay.
we need to, I guess, I suggest at our next meeting that we have suggestions for changes or not to the
Yeah, because
award.
that needs to go up on the website. Okay, all right, so why don't we talk about, could you repeat some of this so that we can discuss it at November 30th meeting, so that we have everything ready for the awards? And we can repeat some of this. Yeah. Because there will be some input. I know one of the things that we have worked on is, with the award, is trying to keep it more historical. So we probably want to go over some of those guidelines, So, okay.
Well, I mean, I don't know if Blair wants to do it now, but on page 43 of the packet, at the top of the page, is the criteria for the nominations used for the award, earlier this year.
Right, exactly. So,
And Blair has suggested that you follow the same.
do the same. Well, that makes it simple. Why don't we just do that? Is that okay with everybody?
Somebody there's been questions in the past about the criteria, so if somebody has a problem with them, then I guess send them to me and I'll I don't know what to do.
Okay, well, okay.
But-
She feels like it was okay last time, so I think we can just repeat the criteria. And we'll have that ready by November 30th. And at the November 30th meeting, if there's anything we need to change, we need to do it then, because it's going to take that much time for the staff to get the flyer ready. Because it has to be done like a month and a half or so before it actually goes into the mailer, so, okay, so is that gonna be okay, time-wise, Susan, November 30th?
Right, I mean, we'll have, a draft flyer for you to look at by then, but,
Okay,
you know, you can still decide then if you're changing the criteria or not for the award.
okay,
I mean, basically, we're gonna attempt to do the flyer for both announcing the event and announcing the award, so.
okay,
It won't be able to go into a ton of detail for that, but what it will do, especially for both, is it will refer people to the website. And then between January and May, obviously, as the event gets more refined, you know, we'll have the information on the website for the fleshed out details of the event. Because like I said, it's not like the flyer in January is going to be able to have your whole schedule of the event plus all the information for the
Yeah.
award. 'Cause
Okay.
it's just not possible to fit that on one page.
Well,
Okay.
Linda,
yeah,
you know, this format we had for last time worked well. I mean, you know, if somebody submits something that's not appropriate, well, then that's up to the committee to, well, that one's not eligible, so it gets tossed off. I mean, save a lot of effort and stuff. This all worked fine last year. What they really have to do is change the date from 2021 to 2022 and call it good. You know, save city staff a lot of effort, save this
Yeah.
body a lot of effort. Then any nomination that comes in, well, yeah, it's a nice looking building, but it doesn't fit the criteria, it gets pushed to the side.
Okay.
You know, let's kind of keep it simple, save a little bit of work for some people.
yeah.
I mean, that's,
Is that okay with you guys, Susan and Michael?
I'm sorry, you're saying for the
Okay, so,
webpage?
yeah, we would just keep it like it is and,
The webpage for the award?
yeah,
Yeah, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's no problem.
because it seemed to work last year, so
just change the date.
that makes it a lot easier. Okay,
So as a reminder,
yeah,
there were 2 flyers. One was the utility flyer,
yes,
and the other flyer is what was the event flyer.
okay.
So
Was this?
this is
is
not
this the
last
one-
year.
Yeah, but, okay.
This
for
is
20
from 2 years ago, when it was
Oh,
a single
okay.
day.
Okay, so we had 2 flyers then.
Correct. And the one flyer was in the utility mailer, which is very short and sweet, just like
Yeah.
Susan discussed. The other was the event flyer. I think it was 2-sided. And it had like the schedule of events, and then the other side had a map perhaps. And that's what we passed out to businesses and posted, you know, around town, and then provided people when they came to the LADWP building.
Okay, so essentially we had 2 flyers.
Correct.
All right, so, do you want to help Susan with that?
We'll work, don't worry, we'll work on it.
Okay,
You know, we'll work on it with you.
okay,
Because the event flyer, the one you'll be using and passing out in advance and passing out at the event, you know, that
Yeah.
can, you know, you don't have to have that done by next month, so.
true.
We'll have plenty
Okay.
of time to work that on and have the drafts in the packets for you, you know, for
Okay.
you to refine.
Okay, all right, very good. Okay, is there any other comments or suggestions? Okay, then moving on, for possible action, discussion on public outreach utilizing local publications. Okay, as you know, we're working on our video of the city buildings. I'm still working on my article. I have to do an interview, which I haven't done yet, so that's still in the works. Any other publications out there being worked on? Okay, hearing none, then we'll move on for possible action. Discussion, update on the status of properties in the historic district or other potentially eligible properties. Okay, hearing no comments, we'll
Wait a
move.
minute, wait a
Oh,
minute, I've got-
Charlie, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
This is really just a question for Michael or Susan. Because I don't quite understand. This 661 Avenue A, detached to carport near, when it says guidelines adopted, it says no.
Oh,
And then it says 2 and 7, so does that mean, I don't understand what the no means, I'm sorry.
The no means, well, item 2 is guidelines do not apply to the subject address. That's an apartment building on Avenue A. The committee never adopted any guidelines for those buildings.
Okay, and then the accessory building is the same, there's no guideline.
Well, actually, there are separate guidelines adopted for accessory buildings. But they, as it noted there, they don't require review by the HPC under circumstances. And in this case, the building, it fell under one of the criteria. Oh, if it was a carport, then, and it was not a corner lot, as long as it was in the backyard, the adopted guidelines for carports say they don't have to come to the committee. Because it's pretty difficult to make a carport match the construction of a house.
So when it says no, when the guidelines adopted, question mark, no means there weren't any guidelines that applied to that building, is that it? Yeah, I just don't understand the no, is that what that means? Is that?
Confusing.
Right, and you just always refer to the notes.
Okay.
Note 2 says guidelines do not apply to the subject address. And that's usually the factor. However, note 7 also indicates that accessory buildings, there are guidelines, but they don't come to the committee if they fall under the exemptions, for those guidelines, and this one did.
And then the next one, the commercial address permit, there's none, but it says the guidelines were adopted.
Well,
Yes.
all the commercial buildings, there are guidelines adopted for all commercial buildings.
Oh, you mean, are there guidelines that would apply if somebody, okay,
Right.
okay,
Right.
I get it. All
Sorry,
right,
I
yeah.
could have left that blank, but yes, all the
Yeah.
commercial buildings have
All right,
guidelines.
Okay, that was just a question. Oh, there was one other thing. I drove down California the other day, and there's a building there, I think it's 608 California, and they were doing a lot of work on that building. It's a building, it's a house. It was a house that was classified by Mooney as non-contributing, but I just wondered if the work, I mean, they were doing a lot. I don't know what they were doing specifically, but I know it looked like new windows and things, but I don't know whether it wasn't a permit issued or if they didn't ask for a permit or if they.
We'll have to check into it. It's possible that they got a permit months ago and only just
Yeah, well,
started
it
work
could-
now,
yeah,
in which
it-
case it gets put on this report when the permit is issued.
Right, yeah,
And then, of course, some things don't require a permit, and under our code, replacing windows if it's the same size, that doesn't require a permit.
Doesn't trigger, and that might
Right.
be it, just there was a lot of action going on there, and I just was curious, is all.
And there's a new building going up on Denver Street, and that's not listed here. I'm sure that there's a permit for that.
Which part of Denver Street?
The far northwest?
Going up, hold it. There is, I'd have to check back, I think that was the one house, there was a house approved some months ago, and so that appeared on this list when the permit was issued. But again, sometimes they take some months before it starts. Now, there's another house proposed on that Denver Street extension.
That's the one.
But that permit hasn't been issued yet. The allotment has to get issued first by the city council.
Okay.
So when the permit gets issued, then it'll appear on this report.
Okay.
And there are no guidelines adopted for that private street Denver extension area for because, the guidelines are specific to addresses. And so all the guidelines pertain to historic homes, the ones that were built in the 1930s. So new vacant lots, there are no guidelines established currently for vacant lots.
Okay, thank you.
I would comment, though, that of interest, if we're gonna have a panel discussion, is one of the things under the new ordinance, the new proposed ordinance, if it comes to fruition, is that new construction would be covered by the Historic Preservation Commission. Hopefully that'll come out in the panel discussion.
Okay, well, Blair's our moderator, so she'll keep that in mind. All right, so it looks like we had some lights here that were in question, and there's some examples of night sky-friendly lighting. Did everyone see that?
Is there any update on what the folks are doing on that project?
The Public Works staff is evaluating your suggestion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. All right, so moving on then, unless there's any other comments. For possible action, committee discussion regarding potential agenda items for upcoming Historic Preservation Committee meetings. Okay, so it looks like we have our hands full anyway with the historic event and the ongoing discussion over preservation grants. So we've got our hands full right now. Okay, so we're going to move on to public comment. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak at the discretion of the chair. Comments made during the public comment period of the agenda may be on any subject. All remarks shall be addressed to the Historic Preservation Committee as a whole, not to any individual member of the Historic Preservation Committee, of the audience, or of the city staff. And we've now opened it up for public comment. Okay, hearing no public comment, then we will adjourn this meeting.